active line.
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Bhavna and I am part of my Kartavya team here at NASCOM Foundation. NASCOM Foundation is a non-profit organization and is a philanthropy arm of NASCOM. At this point of time, I just want to check if I'm audible to everyone. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the question box in your Microsoft Team control panel. We will bring them up during the presentation or after the presentation. I have Saurabh and Jyoti from NASCOM Foundation team with me who will help us out with taking questions. With COVID-19 continuing to impact people and countries around the world, teams everywhere have moved to remote work. As the fourth webinar in this series, we hope to help you in how to protect your data, be safe from misinformation and online fraud, and sign contract digitally. Now, please join me in welcoming our guest of the day, Dr. Kanika Seth. Dr. Kanika Seth is an internationally renowned cyber lawyer, IP, and media law expert practicing in the Supreme Court of India and High Court of Delhi. She is an accomplished author, policymaker, and educator on cyber law. Dr. Seth is the founder of Seth Associates, an established law firm based in Delhi that renders legal services to both domestic and global clients for more than 2 decades. She is the founder of a non-profit FIRE Foundation for Institutional Reform and Educational working to spread cyber awareness in India. Dr. Kanika, over to you, please.
Thank you. At the outset, I want to thank NASCOM Foundation for taking up this very pertinent topic in today's times. And thank you all for joining today. I'll be taking you through Stay Safe Online webinar by NASCOM Foundation today. And as we all, understand, the relevance of the topic is quite, apt at this point. So we'd like to begin, the presentation. And at this point, I feel that it's very important for us to understand where we are heading. We are all in COVID times. It's definitely unprecedented. More than 5,000 cases we have crossed in India. And it is expected that it'll be probably touching 10,000 in a week. So understanding the gravity of the situation and the lockdown, we have all decided to work from home. Companies are, preferring to work from home because there isn't a choice. And at this point, what is most important, as our Honorable Prime Minister also puts it, health and safety of our citizens. And so while we go online and work from home, we are definitely, coming across various challenges at this point, whether it is social distancing or it is increase in anxiety and stress and the paranoia, especially spread by fake news. So it's taking a toll on the social, mental, economic well-being of everybody, whether it's an entity or an individual. And the rising crimes, cyber crimes at this point of time, especially during the COVID times, is heightening. We have reports to say that even 3 times over, the cybercrime rate has increased in the past few days. And that brings me to the challenges from work from home, whether it is, people using their personal laptops or official laptops, the fake news apps and sites and links, they are percolating the web, various attacks of different nature, and at various levels, whether it is hardware, software, or network security or cloud. We'll be discussing some of these issues today and understanding what are the best practices, how we can safeguard ourselves, our data, and work safely from home. So now, before we even start with this, it's important to in fact say that the storms arise within us at this point or around us, but the wisdom lies in staying calm, because when you're in a storm, the best is to stay calm. So my best is, message across would be to maintain your serenity and cool and do whatever best we can, in order to way through this time. Now, when we say NGOs, they are playing a huge role. NGOs with government agencies, we really are coming across various news reports, the way they are helping out, whether it is reaching out for food or any other mental or health support. It's immense. So I'm glad that I'm kind of addressing a lot of NGOs today, and thank you. I express gratitude for doing a wonderful job in this time of crisis for us. So this brings me to the work from home environment and the threats. So why are the threats so imminent at this point? It's very important to understand that the offices are working from home, so their virtual private network, if they have any, or certain companies have also, or certain entities have rented out certain laptops and given it to their employees. They are using free video conferencing. Some are using paid video conferencing. There are threats of interception. Employees using, their private Wi-Fi systems may not have enough security or robust systems in place. And when you're using handphones and you're also doing official work through handphones, it may be susceptible to antivirus, if there is no proper antivirus and anti-spyware, then susceptible to those kind of cyber attacks. Then companies may not have installed data loss prevention software, especially the small scale ones may not have done the same. Then how do we detect there has been a compromise of data or network security? Hackers are using identity theft, wishing, smishing, and phishing attacks, basically to gain personal information by giving fake emails or other, keyloggers and malwares and trojans into particular attachments going with the mail or otherwise, and that's leading to a havoc. Fake links, apps, testing kits, vaccines, infected ebooks, because people are eager to read and they're not really looking at the terms and conditions of what service they are taking and what data it is taking away from them, freely giving away the access to their photos, camera, and other things when it's not even needed, for a particular app to work. So these are certain cybersecurity threats, and the landscape looks like this today. I now feel that we should, if we see the next slide, different levels of security threats. You see the hardware security system threats. There are also application security issues, because we're using n number of applications today on our devices. Cloud security issues, network security issues, IT policies and incident response may not be there in a particular enterprise the way it should be. Password security issues, authentication checks, behavioral security issues, and operating software security patches, they may not be there. And so various, the gamut of layers of security are involved when we're talking about working from home. This is the paradigm, how it looks like. The rise in cybercrimes, we are aware, but what are the studies indicating? New ransomware attacks have mushroomed in the past few days, like the COVID lock. It was spread as a disguised coronavirus tracking app. And I'm happy that we have the government now come up with Arogya Setu and Corona Kavach, which are authentic apps to use. And that is more reliable than just taking up any app which is floating on the net today. Now hackers are exploiting this COVID panic. So whether it is fake Zoom invites or other particular emails, one has to be very, very careful of them. socially engineered attacks. There are various, I would say, mails coming with hidden malware for cryptocurrency miners and use of Trojans and adware, asking users to sign into their applications and accounts like Amazon, for instance, and scams of donation, asking for donations with fake sites and fake links. So criminals are also impersonating the IT help desks and writing as if they're writing from a government agency. And that's what we have to be careful of. Different kinds of cybersecurity attacks, are happening. So whether it is work from home right now, fears of COVID-19 are spreading an information stealer called Loki bot. Again, this is something which is a malware. So we have to have very robust the current OS systems updated on the systems, and also the software have to be very, very updated in terms of tracking and quarantining these viruses which are floating on the net as well. We should not be downloading any .exe files, because they could have ransomware attacks, linked with them. And they would hijack a system and entire data and encrypt it, and they not be able to access any files from there. So that's what we need to understand. And there are fake websites which are being blocked. For example, this coronavirus medical kit is known to be a fake website. So if you're getting any kind of mails from these websites or these particular bodies, it just should ignore them and report also to the authorities. Now this slide explains basically the kinds of crimes which we are facing. Spoofing is one, which is to conceal one's real identity through proxy servers, through malware, through software. Just hide one's real identity. That's possible through software. And criminals are actually cashing on this particular software and misusing it. Fraudulent debits are happening into people's accounts, ransomware attacks, malwares, and then phishing and data theft. These are the key problems. And obviously fake news also is something which we are grappling with at this point. This slide also shows PDFs, links, and MP4 or docx files which are circulating on the net are affecting the home working environment. If you're working from home, you shouldn't be downloading any of those which are not trusted from the trusted sources. And even fake mails from WHO, are floating, which are not really from WHO. Fake donation links and sites are there, but you should go to the genuine official site of a particular entity like WHO or a PM relief fund, you can see here, or you can see there's a new fund which is created by the PM, which is the PM cares fund also. Now this .mygov.in is also an authentic portal. You can use those sites which are official. That is the bottom line idea of donating with a clear understanding where you're donating, because otherwise there are huge number of phishing websites and rackets. This slide itself presents to you what are the websites which are blocked in the last few days. And fake news, as I said, is another issue which we are combating. So the Supreme Court of India has also given directions to the social media platforms to block this fake news from circulation. And there are effective measures taken by the MHA. We are trying to make a whole website which does a fact checking for prevention in terms of educating people of this particular news is fake, or this particular video is manipulated or doctored. That's possible. And on your own also, you can rely on official newspaper websites or telecom companies informing people and educating them about the real status updates. The WHO website, the Ministry of Information Technology, Electronics, MIT, is also doing a wonderful work in spreading awareness with various advisories floating on the net. And the government of India is making their efforts along with the social media platforms like Facebook and WhatsApp to combat fake news as a huge issue now. So whether it is content that you can check or not, yes, you can yourselves also check whether this news is fake. using such websites like Fact Checker, Botometer, Boom, and Google Reverse Image Search, YouTube Data Viewer, SM Hoaxlayer, and there are newer technologies also which are coming, like TruthShare, for instance. TruthShare has, in fact, it's known to be a new technology which is published in ResearchGate. If you'd like to see more about this, there's a link given here. It relies on third identity model, where you can actually decipher who is the person behind a particular news post on any kind of social media. It would give you that identification, and I think that's a wonderful new technology to work with, apart from the DNA photo hash mechanism, which is another technology people are using to, or platforms are using to stop duplication of fake news, especially images online. CERT-In has issued advisories on cybersecurity measures in COVID times. So here, CERT-In is educating people on various apps which they have developed to use them rather than any other app for safety. There's a WhatsApp chat box also, MyGov Corona Help Desk, which can be accessed by people by sending a text to this particular number, and it gets the correct information from this particular authority. Then you have various advisories by the CERT-In, especially when you're using Zoom. A lot of people are using Zoom. There are lots of advisory tips from the government on how you should use this platform. Enable the waiting room feature, for instance, or disable join before host feature, and various other tips have been given, which you can look through while if you're using Zoom. And this UPI ID, PM Care at SBI, is the correct UPI ID. There was a case registered against another person who's created a fake UPI ID, which is PM Cares at SBI. PM Cares at SBI. So this is something that you have to be very, very careful of. The people, the criminals are using a small letter, change in the letter, and trying to fish. Basically, this is a phishing attack. The donations would go to a wrong handle. So that's what we have to be very careful of. What is the correct handle? We have to only go with that. Then we come to the best practices which people are giving at this point, and the government also has given. Apart from the softwares being up to date, we have to pay attention to the apps which are requesting access to our data. Also Bluetooth, when you're not using it, you have to turn off the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi. And you can go through this page online and check the various advisories given. But we will be focusing on the best practices as we go along. I will also touch on the hardware security and the software security and other issues. But before we do that, I know a lot of NGOs have joined us today. So you may be finding it difficult to sign any document. For that matter of fact, any entity signing another document with another entity is very difficult to do e-contracting. No, legal contracts are perfectly valid even if signed electronically or through without using a paper. So DocuSign is one of these encryption services available. You can still sign legally valid contracts using digital signatures and encryption technologies. Small Token is there, which has it's based on PKI, which is cryptography, and you can encrypt a particular data, and it's also safe. It will not be infiltrated by anybody or intercepted by anybody. And let me explain this, that the Indian law finds that, or states that the electronically signed contracts are well recognized under Indian law. So Section 10A of IT Act, or we talk about Sections 3, 4, 5, legal recognition has been given under the IT Act to such contracts. There have been few landmark judgments like the PV Anwar versus Bashir case, and now the Shafi Mohammed case, which has basically held that a party who is not in possession of a device, for example, he can produce the electronic document and may not be required to produce Section 65B certificate, which was otherwise to be given by the Chief Technology Officer of a particular organization. So if you have the original device, you can actually produce that also. But if you don't have it, then if that particular secondary evidence is there with you in the form of a clip which your office has, you can also give a 65B certificate and say this is correct and authentic, and it will be admissible. But if you don't have that on your system and you are not in possession of that secondary evidence, then you can still lead it by other ways of evidence, and it's not mandatory to produce that certificate. That's what Shafi Mohammad's case has said. And video conferencing, recordings of meetings, the audio recordings, all are admissible in the court of law if they meet with particular standards laid down by our cases. The clip has to be non-doctored and authentic, and other particular requirements are there. But then that is given in the RM Malkani case, and certain other judgments have come on that ground. So in fact, I would like to mention that our whole e-court system is functioning at this point. 21 high courts and 18,000 plus these bodies. In fact, the courts, their district courts are running on the e-filing mode. That is by the e-committee of the Supreme Court. They've created this software, and they've created this judicial, it's a huge reform in the country. So if everything can happen electronically, even the hearings are now sometimes in these times, especially happening through video conferencing in urgent cases. So this initiative was e-filing was led by the committee Supreme Court, and Honorable Justice Lokur was heading this whole exercise, and I was fortunate to work with him on this manual also. So what I want to explain here is that whatever is happening online today, you can still transact business. The judiciary itself recognizes the legality of electronic documents, accepts it as a proof, and you can produce that as a proof of any relationship that you're entering into right now. My advice would be to use digital signatures if possible and encryption, because that makes it, there's a presumption in law that this is authentic if you've done that. Now that brings me to the cyber safety best practices, from home. This particular aspect is, I think, very, very relevant today. And we are talking about softwares, and we are talking about having complex router passwords. A lot of people are still using WEP as a Wi-Fi. It needs to shift to WPA23. That's very important in terms of technology. Turning off your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth when not in use, and using the productivity applications, you have to be very careful that they should not be spoofed websites. I know a lot of people just go on to Google or other search engines and just type the bank name, and whatever site comes along, they do the net banking there. And that's a huge blunder to do, especially in these times. So we need to be careful that if we have to type a URL of a bank, we have to know that by heart, and we have to do that in the URL address bar. That's important. And we should not be using the same password in multiple, websites across different services we use. It's good to use a password manager. And that, what it does is it creates a master password, which you just shouldn't remember. And the rest of the passwords get encrypted and kept safely. Some are stored on cloud, some password managers store it in an encrypted file on your desktop. So you have to choose the service in such a way that you prefer. And the source, obviously, the source of the apps and links, as I said, have to be, very, very carefully verified before you actually click on anything. And read the terms of use of a service before we actually use a service. And now, when we say two-factor authentication, we have to activate the OTP verification and other processes, because simply one authentication check is not enough in today's times. So whether it is OTP verification or any kind of authentication checks you can have, through password manager or otherwise, you must have that. When we are paying on HTTPS websites, because this is protected by SSL technology with a lock. You'll see the lock on the URL. That's a common scenario at this point. And we use websites to check whether it is fake news or not, and register for banking alerts. That's important because a lot of times I'm getting these queries that we are duped of certain monies because this has happened, compromised account or plastic money fraud, but they have not registered for banking alerts and they have not been timely able to inform the bank in a quick fashion. So that is important that we take those due diligence measures. And if there is a criminal complaint, you can also file it online these days at cybercrime.gov.in. And there are helplines available by the Ministry of Home Affairs. They have this on their website. Now, VPN is also very, very important that the offices start functioning with VPN, because I'll explain this technology in few slides now, because VPN basically encrypts the data and also conceals the identity, the IP address of the user. So if there are 100 IP addresses going, it conceals the identity of the users, gives it another IP address so that the criminals on the web do not recognize, and it creates a tunnel between the the employees who are working or the systems which are connected through the net, making it a safe haven. So that's advantage of using a VPN. And a lot of entities are using good data loss prevention softwares. There are some policies which are made by the entity that what kind of data should not go out of the office. So there is a filter possible and there is an alert mechanism possible if certain data is sent outside the office network or email by some employee. Then sensitive systems should only be restricted to certain employees who have the need to know, and the rest of the systems cannot be just given away. The access cannot be given to the other employees. There has to be a crisis management incident response in place. There are many websites which are not even I would say available, certain the IT policy terms. There are many IT policy terms which are not even available for employees to know, or the privacy policies of a particular company. And that's important that we have that as a fallback measure. We should always have those. Then emergency incident response should always be worked out. And when we see the digital signatures usage, it's very, very limited, the digital signatures and encryption. People are not aware of it, but it's a wonderful technology to work with. Then built-in encryption, both Apple and Microsoft, they have good tools in their OS to support it. And password managers, as I said, is a very good way of kind of safeguarding your passwords, and security awareness trainings. So these are key essentials in today's times. When we talk about the layers, you see, of security map. So you see this particular slide gives you the layers. Data link layer, then you have the IP layer, then the TCP IP, the secure socket layer for the transport, and then the application layer. Now, when we talk about these layers of security, at this point, whether it's a Wi-Fi signal, you have a data link type, layer, and then you have the IP which is going, the IP address. If you can conceal that in the network layer, that's a good option through a VPN. And then you're using a secure socket layer to transmit any kind of data. And the applications which you're using are also something which is fully, checked and, kind of authenticated. The access is kept secure. So these are the basic layers. And when we talk about Wi-Fi security, as I said, VPA2 and 3 are the key, the current, I would say, regimes in the Wi-Fi security domain. And the key advantage of those are that it's highly encrypted, and it helps you keep the the data integrity. And there's a key management option which is like in WPA2 is a 4-way handshake, so it's very, very secure. It's a better way of doing it than having a WEP connection. Then your VPN, this diagram gives you what kind of security we get through VPN. If we don't have a VPN, or if we have a VPN, you can simply see that encryption layer creates a tunnel which hides the traffic from the entities on the network. So it's very secure, and that's the best way to safeguard yourselves while you're working from home in case you have a VPN to use. And this is also this particular diagram shows the same as well. This flow of events, you can see the ISP provider also is in between, but then the person who's interacting on the net, the identity and the data is kept secure using a VPN. This brings me to how the password manager works, and then if you see that, then there are n number of gadgets we are using today, and there's a master password created for each of the gadgets. You can have this master password created, and for n number of applications you're using, they will all be encrypted and kept in a single repository. And that's why there's security, because nobody can read that encrypted database, and the password manager maintains that secrecy. Then you have the data loss prevention softwares. At various levels, this works, because at the storage level, when you've stored data, it should not go out of the data. The data should not go out from there by anybody who's unauthorized. So the storage, the endpoint, the particular node that you're using, the particular system you're using should not be used to steal data. The network level. At the network level, when it's being transmitted, it should not, it should give an alert that there's a data loss possible or a potential loss of data happening. So real-time monitoring through data loss prevention software. One of them is the Symantec, and there are very different kinds of companies with these software, but take any kind of reputed software companies. DLP should work on all the three levels. Then how this will work? How the DLP will work. So if you have a credit card, for example, you're using that particular data, and it's going out of the system. For example, if somebody is mailing it across, the scanning happens. If there's a violation, a red flag happens, and then after violation is detected, the action is blocked. So that is possible, and then the entire mail will not go. So it will be again, red flagged and kept aside. That's how the DLP works. And then we come down to cloud security. Cloud, in very long and short of it, in very simple terms, when we are talking about cloud, we have different kinds of cloud today: public cloud, private, and then the hybrid cloud. How do we maintain security in such a time? Application security layer, there's a file storage security, network security, workload security, container security. So n number of aspects attached to cloud security, and single point companies like Azure are giving this solution, and that's very good, because if you have that, then all these things are taken care of. Nobody can steal data from there. Nobody can kind of look at the data or access the data without authority. And the applications are secure, taken from a cloud, so everybody can use that. And this data is encrypted as well, very high security. And that's the best way to actually secure yourselves in today's times. Now this snapshot, if you look at this snapshot, it lists 16 steps to ensure the IT is secure. It's not something that one can more elaborately explain through a graphic representation. I really like the way this is portrayed here. Right from the time, step one, right from the time when it is a secure web hosting, when you're hosting a site, the domain name management is secure. Then you go to email security, that the systems you're using for emails are secure. Then multi-factor authentications are put in place. Then your filtering and encryption mechanisms are there. Email security is there. And if you're using Office 365 or any particular system, and backups are there, the entire gateway security is maintained. That means your hardware, your network, your software, all the security aspects are important. What kind of local network security you're using, user access controls, endpoint protection, that is the systems that are being used, the detection of advanced threats, then end-to-end encryption usage, mobile device management, internal IT network and security policies, and then user trainings, education, having proper, I would say incident response, IT policies, crisis management, and nowadays resilience. All these policies are becoming very, very important. And when we draft these terms and conditions, we have to keep in mind that such times like COVID times can occur now. I think all of them will need a fine tuning. And then you have this monthly vulnerability scannings and the timely monitoring and periodic assessments of security threats. And in the end, it will be also complete, whether to check whether it is compliance with law, because everything that you're doing has to have a compliance, regulatory compliance, and a complete backup and resilience plan in place, because that's very, very important in especially in today's times. So it's when we talk about cybersecurity, it seems a simple word like, okay, it's only cybersecurity, but now we understand the kind of levels of security and the technologies needed, to really have a proper enterprise function in the best possible, robust manner with current systems and technologies in place. So they are really, really important. This brings me to, the technical aspects we've discussed, but the IT Act, which is the main legislation, which protects, people from cyber crimes. And what is the IT Act saying about cybersecurity? You all would be aware of, the overhauling of law in terms of creation of a new law on personal data protection, which we are, currently the country is debating on the bill, which is there, PDP bill. And the Justice case, Puttaswamy case, where the Honorable Supreme Court through a 9-judge bench, upheld the right to fundamental right to data and privacy of a citizen. So that's something that we are all aware of, and this will itself mark a new beginning in the data protection regime in India, and how the law will, protect its citizens once this gets enacted. But even right now, even with the current law, there are sections in the IT Act like Section 43 and then 66, where if there is an unauthorized access or a particular download and extraction or a disruption or a damage to a system, it is a punishable offense. And Section 66C punishes identity theft and then cheating by personation, C and D, you can see. Then there is cyber terrorism. There is a punishment up to life imprisonment for cyber terrorism. Cheating, of course, Section 420, we are aware of IPC. So there are a number of laws even now with the special law and the IPC, the general law, which protects us against data loss and data, where there are fraudulent activities like debits. And in case of this happens, there is obviously immediate need to, inform the police about this and get an FIR done. Safeguard the snapshot of the electronic evidence, inform the bank in case it's a banking attack, and changing of the passwords is important. The plastic money frauds, you have to immediately block the plastic money, this credit cards or a debit card, whichever is involved. And if it's a bank server hacked, then there's a zero liability, on the customer because it's a server attack. And even otherwise, if a customer is, bank has been attacked, the account itself, and he informs the bank timely, there's an FIR registered, he can therefore, any kind of debits thereafter made into his account, he will not be liable for the same. The bank has to compensate him for the same. So this is how the law protects, the citizens today. The data is sacrosanct. It's something which we all understand has a huge value, the privacy of an individual. And there are other sections too, but having this topic in focus on work from home and the data protection, we're only talking about these sections, but there are other offenses under IT Act, and there are protection measures. And what are the remedies available, whether it is criminal or civil. In criminal, it is usually the prosecution, and then conviction is the result. In the case of pursuing a compensation claim, there's a damages which are awarded, and that really compensates the person who has suffered unauthorized debit, for example, into his account. Now, this is the cybercrime reporting portal. You can all visit that, cybercrime.gov.in, and you can see that you can actually register complaints or any kind of reports that you'd like to make. If there's something that you've seen as a fake news or objectionable, or you want to report a particular offense, you can do the same. And that brings me to the end of this the slideshow, but then we will be talking about these issues in more detail, I think, in the Q&A. I think we can start taking questions if you have any from the audience.
Yes, Dr. The first question that we have is, how can we get the common people to know about misinformation in these times?
Yes, very important. The misinformation, I want to explain what is misinformation. It could be completely fake. For example, a completely fake news. We've seen in the COVID times a myth that having garlic cures, or prevents coronavirus. It is a completely fake news, and the WHO also on their site has said same, that it is completely fake. You have websites which have, even Times of India has a fact check column. So if you go onto that website, every day they are getting queries, and they are themselves also checking fake news and putting it on their fact check column. So there's a particular window in every newspaper, mostly they have this fact check, and there are also many websites like Fact Checker, or you can see the other websites. I have named a few of them here. TrustShare, for example. This is a new technology also to detect fake news, and you can check them by going to those websites. And it is our responsibility. We don't forward anything which we are not sure of. So WhatsApp has also, I think, come up with a particular feature rather in these times, that you can't forward it to more than one person, because earlier it was more than 5 you could have easily sent, but now the forwards are not happening. If it's not something that one trusts, one should not forward it. So they're also doing things from their platform, not to more than one person, if that news looks like not so authentic. So that is our duty as a citizen of India, in these times, to really check before we post anything. And the best way to check is go to official newspapers or channels, PIB reports, or go to ministry site, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Information Technology. They have various advisories, and they are informing people what kind of fake news are percolating and what they should be not believing in, those kind of particular news. So that's something which we can do at our end. I hope I've answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Karnika. The next question that we have is, can we use the scanned copy of our signatures to sign contracts in this time?
Yes, you can. But as you understand that there is a lot of possibility of morphing. People can fabricate signatures also, or copy paste them very easily. So it is not a foolproof security, to use that feature. I would rather say that you should be able to, use a feature which is like cryptographic, like encryption technologies. Digital signatures are the best way right now. We currently know of the legal, signatures through digital means, that is PKI based signatures. So you should be able to do that, and using that, you will have two, best, I would say, advantages. One is that data integrity. Nobody will be able to tamper with the data which is going from your particular account, nor the data is tampered, nor will it go to anybody else, because it is secured with a cryptographic technology. So that's the best way. If you would want to communicate, sign contracts online, that's the best way. If you have a digital signature, you must use that, and cryptographic signatures. I'm sure the KYC is quite strict in terms of requirements to check who is taking the signatures of the subscriber, but you can nevertheless check with the authentic service providers. There are lots of them. One is the DocuSign, then there is TCS also has various options available. You can go through the registered vendors for the same and apply for that. I think that's the safest bet, although I don't see that even the digital signed ones, the ones which have an image will also work, but I don't recommend it really because of the number of hacking attempts and the number of morphing attempts which are happening today.
Dr. Karnika, the next question we have is, where can we report in case we find some misinformation being spread in the community?
Yeah. So, the NCRB has and the Ministry of Home Affairs, they have created a portal called cybercrime.gov.in. If you're sure that this news is really not true and it is a fake news, you can actually report it to this portal. And there's a helpline also given on that portal, cybercrime.gov.in. There are helpline numbers which you can immediately call. It will help other citizens also, because people might be, gullible. They'll fall into a racket. Maybe it's a phishing email or something. If you report it, they will block it. The government also puts advisories from time to time, like it, the CERT has also done it on their, official websites, and that helps because it stops that from circulation further, and people will not believe that anymore.
Thank you, Dr. Karnika. The next question that we have is, with the government putting in money in Jan Dhan accounts, how can we help them stay safe online while transacting?
Okay, so see, I know they have put in monies, but when they are transacting, whether it is through a UPI handle or whether online means, you have to be careful of what net banking you can do. For example, in lockdown times, you have to use net banking, or you're using apps for transactions or payments. It's important to give them a help desk, kind of assistance to explain them that they should not be sharing passwords with anybody, and whatever information they are given, that has to be very securely put in that particular service they are using, because the service itself has to be reliable. For example, the KYC also has to be strong enough in that, because there are a lot of fake payment apps also percolating, and if they don't have RBI permission and they are on the web, or they are just portraying as if they are collecting monies for donation or otherwise, they should not be used. So I think it's very important for people to know that they have to go to really authentic apps and net banking services, and they should be cautioned on not sharing their passwords and other financial data with anybody at this point. So that education is paramount, and I think these awareness campaigns really help, because you can spread the word around in your communities, and NGOs have a huge role to play in this.
Thank you, Dr. Karnika. The next question that we have is, how to make sure that all of the organization data is protected even when it is being shared between various different employees working from different locations.
So if you have a VPN and a data loss prevention software installed, I think it takes care of a lot of things. And if you have cloud security also deputed, it is best, because as I explained to you, there are so many dimensions of security, and securing an organization has a number of loopholes and points of check. So if they all can be plugged together, that will have a holistic security mechanism in place. Anywhere it falters, there could be a lacuna which we need to address immediately. For example, I know that a lot of entities who may not even have an IT policy in place, and now during COVID times, they are being they understand the gravity, and they know that how do we handle this situation if there's a data loss. So deployment of tools, technology, education, training, all are a part of security, even framing the right policies are a part of security. So all these dimensions are as important as the other. So we have to look at it at holistic plane. But yes, I know it cannot be all achieved at once, but yes, by and large, if you can have a policy in place and you can deploy a technology which you can deploy online through, address a particular service, you take it on a particular cloud security service or a VPN, probably to some extent, this can be, plugged. The threats can be plugged, but they all have relevance. All these, endpoints are equally important. All these levels and layers of security are each of them is very important.
Thank you. The next question that we have is, which is a free and suitable VPN that we can use?
I don't recommend freeware. Reason is that, again, lots of freeware have nothing is for free. So sometimes, there are malwares floating on the web and you're not aware of a particular free service being given is authentic and doesn't, extract information from your systems. So I would recommend taking paid services. And there are number of VPNs available. You have this Nord or the Express, and Norton also has. So you can use credible companies and reputed paid services. Those are more reliable in terms of security, because it shouldn't be that somebody wants to buy a medicine and ends up with a virus infection itself. So it's like you have to be sure of what you're getting in return. So if you've paid money and you have a reputed company you're taking a product from, it ensures that at least the service you're getting is reliable. Whereas if you're getting something for free and you're not sure what you're being given is really authentic, that puts a question mark. Let's avoid it at this, especially at this point of time where there's so many phishing attacks happening.
Thank you, ma'am. The last question that we have is, can we have some more brief note on e-contracts?
Can we have? Would you be able to repeat the question, Saurabh?
Can we have a little more? I think it is what it means to say is, can we have a little more deep dive into e-contracts?
E-contracts, okay. So when we say e-contracts, in legal terms, there is an offer, there's an acceptance, and there's a consideration paid for having created a particular contract. So when we make that e-contract, if it is happening online, it could happen through various means. For instance, if you're going to a particular site and there is a terms of service and there is a I agree button, if you click on that, you're actually agreeing to an online contract. That's known as a click wrap agreement. And if you're going to a website which it has its terms and conditions, and it puts a clause there that by browsing on this site you're agreeing to the terms and conditions of this particular website, then you're entering into a browse wrap agreement. So that's how it works. And if you purchase the software, from maybe a shop, and you're opening the particular box and you're using that software, it is known as a shrink wrap agreement. So these are different terminologies we've used to define different kinds of e-contracting. And especially today, if you're not able to sign contracts in hard copy and you're not able to send it across, there's no courier service, you can use the digital signatures, or you can simply scan and mail those particular contracts by handwritten signatures. Ideally, it should be a digital signature if you have one, that, as I said, will ensure the security of data and the source and destination are sure, and that has not been intercepted by anybody unauthorizedly. But if you don't have that, maybe a hard copy, if you want to sign it with hand and then scan it and send it, that is another possibility. Digital signatures copied onto a screen and saved on the particular system of yours that you're using may not be that a great idea, because it can be easily morphed. So that's something that I strongly feel that we shouldn't be doing. And the e-contracts are valid in law. As I said, the IT Act takes care of that. The legal contracting, Section 10A of the IT Act, considers the e-contracts as very legal documents, very valid in terms of admissibility, or even authenticity can be proven. And there is a presumption in law, that this is a correct document or authentic document if it is digitally signed. So that evidence law of ours in India, it protects signature, digital signature used documents to that extent. So that is how the evidence law and the Indian IT Act protects any kind of online contracts. And the way the whole scheme of the act moves, that the functional equivalence to handwritten signatures has been given to digital signatures, and the central government has recognized the digital signatures as one of the main means. Currently we don't have a circular or a notification to say that simply biometric signatures will be recognized as secure electronic record signatures or electronic signatures. So the regime gives preference to digital signatures, while other signatures, biometric or hand signatures or scanned signatures, people are using that. But the legal sanctity in terms of presumption in law with evidence is there to digital signatures alone. There's no embargo to using the other forms, however. So that's the current regime at the point.
Great. I think we have other questions, but we'll take them offline. We can also request the attendees to actually send us more questions at bigtech@nascomfoundation.org. Bhavna, would you want to take this ahead from here?
Yes, Saurabh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Karnika, for such an engaging session, and a big thank you to all our participants too for taking time out for this session. With Big Tech, we have many softwares for data security and DocuSign, like Symantec, Quick Heal. So if anyone is interested, they can write to bigtech@nascomfoundation.org and can just have a more information about the same. So thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you so much.
Take care and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, NASCOM. Thank you, NASCOM, for having a webinar on.
Thank you.